Welcome to the Phi-Lacrosse-ophy podcast, where host and lacrosse expert Jamie Monroe will do what he does best, talk about lacrosse. Each episode will provide listeners with education, insights, stories, and lessons about the lacrosse world. We will discuss current events, coaching, philosophies, and college lacrosse recruiting. Now let's get started with your host, Jamie Monroe.
How's it going, everybody? Really excited to welcome Greg Cannella to the Phi-Lacrosse-ophy podcast. Greg is the head coach at UMass. Been there for 28 years. He's been to the NCAA title game. Has been NCAA Coach of the Year. Has been to 9 NCAA tournaments. Greg is in the top 10 in wins in Division I men's lacrosse all time. So, Greg, welcome to the show. So fired up to have you on board.
I'm fired up too. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, man.
The Phi-Lacrosse-ophy podcast is made possible in part by the JM3 video assessment tool. There is no question that video is critical to player development. One way or another, your son or daughter must utilize video to learn their game and the game. To learn more, see video testimonials, or register, go to www.jm3sports.com/video right now.
Well, I usually kick off this podcast with talking about mentors and a coaching journey. So you started out at Brook High School and then made your way to the junior college ranks right out of school, won a championship, and then made your way to UMass. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the experiences you had on your way to getting to UMass in the first place. Because as people may or may not know, Greg graduated from UMass, was an assistant at UMass before he became the head coach at UMass.
Yeah. Well, I guess it starts, you mentioned Brook, so it starts at Brook. And my dad was a successful football coach and lacrosse coach at Brook High School. He went on to become the assistant principal there, worked there for over 40 years. So I think when you talk about mentors, my dad was the first mentor that I had growing up. He got all of us, I have 4 brothers, he got us all involved in playing sports. And I loved every sport. But he got us involved in lacrosse. It was a sport that he played at Cortland State. He was a football player, grew up in Harlem in New York City as a basketball and football player, went to Cortland State and was convinced by his lacrosse roommates, his football roommates to play lacrosse. And some of the guys that went on and were tremendous high school coaches upstate New York. Don Quinn being one of them in Rochester, New York. So he was the first mentor. And then obviously 4 older brothers kind of pushed me into playing lacrosse and staying involved. And I always went and watched their games and was manager of their games. And even at the high school level, when I was playing youth lacrosse, we only practiced a couple of days a week. And I went to all the high school practices and high school games as I could. And Tony Seamen was the next mentor that we all had. He was a teacher in our high school. He coached us, my older brothers, through lacrosse. He only coached me for 1 year as a sophomore at Brook High School and moved on to the college ranks, CW Post, Penn, Hopkins, and then Towson.
That's amazing. You had Tony Seamen as a high school coach, and people forget that he was a high school coach before he went on to be a Hall of Fame level.
Tremendous high school coach, tremendous soccer coach as well. He actually set a record. He was my freshman soccer coach. He won like 120 straight games on a freshman soccer team. It was like in Sports Illustrated and all this stuff. So, but he was a real innovator for our sport in terms of some of the things he did. It was the first time I was introduced to like interval training in terms of running on the track and doing 200s and 400s and such. He also was a guy that was 10-man riding in high school. I mean, No one ever did this. And he brought that to the college ranks. It was very successful. He was also one of the first guys that I remember inverting middies behind.
Wow.
And having midfielders dodge from behind, even in high school when we did it. Guys that were really good athletes. If we had a good attack that year, he would put the 4th attackman and invert him or wing dodge him. So all those things that I saw through just watching and then playing, really, really cool things for me in the future. And I was fortunate to also work with Larry Glenns, who's in the National Coaches Hall of Fame for high schools at Limerick High School. Another guy that was a tremendous coach. He was more of a guy that motivated us and was really, really positive with us and kind of encourage us to kind of go out there and be ourselves and explore what we could do athletically. So that was another great mentor, and another person that when I look back on it, I try to be Larry Glenns every day in my job in terms of how he motivated the individuals, but he also motivated the team. That was kind of my first view of that. Listen, my dad was an old school guy, tried out for the Giants. Vince Lombardi was his, mentor, like a guy that he loved and looked up to. And he was my way or the highway. Larry Glenns was the total opposite of that. He was the first, he got into coaching probably late 60s, 70s. And he was one of those first guys that said, hey, this is about the players. This is about the guys. It's about those guys going out there and using their athleticism. And I'm going to allow them to do this. I'm going to encourage them to do it. So it was great for me to see that. You mentioned Nassau Community College. I first went to the University of Maryland, and Dick Adele was my coach there for a year and a half. I did leave to come back, and I played for Rich Speckman and George Powers at Nassau Community College. What an experience that was. Coach Beckman just got inducted into the National Hall of Fame this year, and he was a system guy that each year you had, a totally new team. And his system, you worked on it from February 1st until the end of May or whenever the championship was. And if you weren't part of that system, you were kind of out. So you played as part of something. And that was really the first time that within, if you want to call it a machine or a system, whatever you want to call it, that you were just part of a spoke on that wheel. And all the spokes had to kind of, and it was a different group then, you had guys from all over on Long Island. Some kids are good students, some kids not great students. It was different personalities that he had to mesh together each year. And that was amazing to see that because, when I first got there, I'm like, how is this going to work? You had three guys on attack that all wanted the ball and all wanted to do something differently. And he convinced us that we had to share it within everybody on the team. So that's another thing that I still preach today, right? And then leaving Nassau, I was able to come up here to UMass. It was totally different. It was more similar to Larry Glenn's. Coach Garber at the time was in his late 50s, early 60s. He was very laid back. He was a preparation guy, all right, prepare. John Wooden was one of his mentors. He was to prepare during the week, and you guys are going to play on the weekend, right? But very fair, very honest, strong passion for the game, strong passion for the guys. When I first got here as a transfer, I didn't have housing. I stayed at his house. He invited me over. They cooked dinner for me. I mean, just incredible stuff that you would never, you could never do today, right? So very fortunate to have those mentors, playing for those guys.
Yeah.
And then
before you move on, let's just talk a little bit about those UMass days because there were some unbelievable teams. And so I was a freshman in '86. That was your first year at UMass. And I remember the attack with Cannella and Carmine. And who was the third guy on that attack? Kelly Carr. And I mean, Tom Carmine, the matchup between Darren Muller and Tom Carmine was unbelievable. Two of the fastest, most athletic guys. People have no idea how good Tom Carmine was too. I mean, like so quick. When I played indoor with him with the Blazers, and like literally he would split to his left and then he'd jump back and just beat you to his right. And then if you wanted to jump back, he could jump back again. I mean, this guy was so fast and quick. But you guys had such a run of, rattle off some of the players. I mean, you had player after player in all positions.
Yeah. In those days, it was, obviously Sal Cassio, Scott Hiller, Tim Sudan, right? You mentioned Tommy Carmine, Kelly Carr.
Jimmy Mack,
Greg Fisk. Jimmy Mack was kind of after me.
Yeah, he was a little after.
But yeah, Sal was really the guy that solidified
He was.
What we did. I can remember Guy Van Arsdale was the assistant coach with Coach Garber, and Guy Van Arsdale used to run white defense. And what's white defense? He said, no one's sliding until they score on Sal. Sometimes this went into the second or third quarter of the game, right? So we wouldn't slide until then.
And meanwhile, Burnsy's going right over everybody's head.
Jerry Burns is on the team. Tommy Aldridge. I mean, they were really good defensemen. Jerry's, 6'5",
yep,
going over the head. Tommy was a West Jenny guy, a very solid positional guy. Just tremendous players. I was very fortunate to be part of those teams.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Tom Carmine, probably the best lacrosse player nobody knows about.
Yes.
Just what he did on the field and how he elevated certainly my game, and I think everybody else's, was incredible. But he was a guy that, 1 year that I played with him, he had 40 goals and 35 assists. Then the next year he had, 35 goals and 45 assists. He was a guy that could do everything. He wasn't just a goal scorer or a feeder. He did everything. He rode hard. He could have played any position on the field with his athleticism. Just tremendous player.
Yeah.
One time.
Sal was so off the charts. And people don't realize how good of an athlete he was. Because you kind of look at him and people are like, Fat Sal, da-da-da-da. But he actually, he would beat you. He would beat a fast attackman to the end line or a sideline on a shot. He could, run the ball. His hands were so quick and good. We never beat UMass in my 4 years, although we only played you 3 times. Because in 1987, our game was canceled with the passing of Vinnie Marinelli. Remember that?
Right, I do remember that. He was a guy that we all played against in high school. Elmont was our rival at Brook High School. I do remember that. But yeah, Sal, we couldn't score against Sal in practice. It was brutal. Sometimes we just go in there and try to tackle him because he'd stuff us so many times. I remember.
So how about this? In my senior year, I played in the North-South game, and Sal and Schmolz, Paul Schmoller and Sal Lacasio were our goalies. How about that?
Those guys went head-to-head. They played in the playoffs a couple times. I think they were 1-on-1 against each other in the NCAA playoffs as well. Two great goalies, great personalities. The thing with Sal that you mentioned, tremendous athlete. He was a high school linebacker, and he was very, very good linebacker. But he was also on his lacrosse team. His senior year of high school, they won one game. I think they were 1-22 on the season.
Wow.
And he comes to UMass and he just turns everything around for the program.
Yeah, 4-year All-American. And back then, the Hill was incredible. I mean, people just don't realize what it was like to go to a college lacrosse game at UMass in the late 80s, early 90s. Kegs were allowed on the Hill. There was grass. The whole student, population seemed to be out there. My senior year, I remember them just chanting my name literally every time I touched the ball. Jamie. I got blown up. Lars Tiffany threw me a really high pass that was it was a long ball that was supposed to be like a good clearing pass, and it was a good pass except for Tim Sudan saw it, and Tim Sudan was he's like a man horse.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's just such an athlete and so fast, and he could shoot it so hard, but he would also blow you up. And so he saw that ball in the air, and I tried to look it up. I'm standing there kind of pretending like it's not coming, but he knew it was coming. And then it took a little bounce, and then I got blown up right into the Hill, got beers thrown on me.
Yep.
Those are the days.
It was interesting for all of us as players, and I'm sure for the visitors as well, just to take in that type of crowd. We had never played in front of those crowds, and it was very exciting for us. It fired us up, and just fun experiences with the people. And like you said, they would back the vans up and back their pickup trucks up at the top of the hill. People were burying kegs in the hill as well.
That's right. Got to bury them, hide them a little bit.
None of this, could ever happen, today. So those are really fond memories and really good times. Anytime you had nice weather, there was a packed house up on Garber. And in fact, my senior year, we played a few games on Garber, and it got out of control. We played Army, and it was about 9,000 people up there. So the UMass police wouldn't allow us to play on Garber when we played Syracuse, and we were forced to go down to football stadium and play Cuse. Like 13,000 people down there. So Pretty cool environment. We would love to play that game on Garber, though.
Is it true at a Syracuse UMass game that the fans just kept throwing oranges if Syracuse would score or whatever, and then finally, like, it was costing UMass, unspoken penalties, and they were like announcing, like, please do not throw oranges anymore, and people just kept chucking oranges.
That's true. And I can remember Coach Garber going over there with the megaphone and saying, please, don't throw oranges, and it's hurting us. We're getting penalized every time, we score, and, we want to be in this game. And, I think that week in the dining hall, they lost more oranges than what would happen in down in Florida in harvest time,
Man, the talent level of those Syracuse, and I've seen the net. Remember back in the day, everything was on NESN, New England Sports Network, right? And John Vassallo was the who's now at ESPNU. He was like the color. I mean, he was the play-by-play guy, and then you got what's his name? The Irish Rova. They'd be talking. He had nicknames for Glover, Steve Glover. Steve Glover would be out there. He was a UNH guy, right?
Was, yes.
The UNH guy, and he had the thickest Boston accent ever, and he did all the games, and he'd call Jimmy Mack the Irish Rova. He had nicknames for everybody, and those were the days. You watch that Syracuse UMass game, those games with the Gate brothers and Zolberti, and
incredible.
Incredible for us.
One game, Sal was on fire, kept them in the game. It was a 10-9 game. They had kept the sprinklers on in the stadium the night before for some reason, and it was a beautiful day, but the field was a mess. And Sal saved everything in the game, and they wound up losing 10-9, unfortunately. But incredible, I think that was 88, so I was still in school. I was graduating because of my transfer, and I was able to watch that game.
Yeah, unbelievable stuff. So then you made a move to coaching at Stony Brook for 4 years under Coach Espy?
Yes, and that was a great move for me personally. I wasn't sure I wanted to coach. I thought I was going to be a high school PE teacher and coach. And this opportunity, actually, Mike Candell, who is a Newsday writer who I play with his son here at Limerick High School. His son played at Amherst College. But he had convinced me to go interview with John. Listen, John was like the first guy that introduced me into college coaching and how to be a college coach in terms of recruiting, writing letters, how do you get out to the kids. And I was hired because at Stony Brook at the time in 1988, they elevated men's lacrosse and women's soccer into Division I, those two sports only. And then eventually they went to D2 and everything, and then D1 and everything. Yeah. But that's why I was hired. So it was a grassroots thing. We kind of had to grow the program, and John, connected all the nuts and bolts for me. Again, introed me into all the nuances within coaching, offense, defense, clearing, riding. Just a tremendous mentor. I see him every year at the convention. We sit down, we talk about lacrosse, X's and O's. Just great coach. Someone that, personally, I could never repay for what he's done for me to boost me into college lacrosse.
That's awesome. And then you made a move back in 1993? Was it 93?
Yeah, fall of 92. So the spring season of 93, Ted Garber had an opening here. Ted was the head coach for 2 years already. And I jumped back in. I really jumped at the job. Coach Garber was still here, still alive. I sat down and spoke to him about it, and he was very positive about the move for me. So, I came back. I was fortunate to have a guy like Mark Millen on the team and Billy Adele, who's out in Denver with you, on the team, two guys that were tremendous leaders. Tommy Lepresti in the goal.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience coming back, and I felt at that time we really needed some change here, and I hopefully I helped Ted with that. Ted was also a tremendous mentor, a guy that was very similar to his dad in terms of coaching, very laid back in terms of what his style was. Getting the guys to just go out and play, coach them during the week, prepare them, and then kind of let them go on game day. And again, that at that time I was young. I was full of, a lot of anger, full of a lot of trying to get out there and prove myself as a coach, and Ted was a guy that said, listen, this is, first of all, if the season's a marathon, the year's a marathon, this is a marathon, recruiting's a marathon. Sit back, relax a little bit, and enjoy every day, and coach these guys up each and every day. And I took that to heart. It was a really good experience for me to be with Ted for those 2 years.
Do you remember the 1993 Yale UMass game?
I do.
Yale. Okay, so I was the assistant at Yale. I was in my third season there, and we had like a 12-5 lead on you, either late in the third or early in the fourth. And Mark Millen pretty much scored like 7 goals and 2 assists in the last maybe 17 minutes of that game, and just it was unbelievable.
Incredible game at Yale. I can remember. I think we were down maybe 13-6, and we wound up winning 14-13. And he scored the last 6 goals of the game. Wherever the ball was on the field, he went and picked it up. We didn't tell him to do that, but if the ball was at the midline, out of bounds, the ball was on the defensive end, out of bounds, he went and picked it up and kind of took over. And fortunately for us, he was able to score all those goals. I can remember one thing in that game more so than what Mark did. We weren't, Yale was taking it to us on the defensive end, and Ted took the entire defense and goalie out of the game. I looked at him and said, what the heck are you doing? He said, well, they're not doing anything anyway, so let's put these other guys in. So he put our backups in, backup goalie, 3 backup defensemen in the game, and they made one stop, and it kind of turned the tide for the team. And eventually he put those other guys back in, but he gave those 4 guys about 7 or 8 minutes of play in the third quarter, and it changed the game.
Great. It's a great move when it works, right?
Amazing stuff. Exactly.
Especially when you got Mark Millen on the other end.
Exactly. If they had scored 5 goals on us, we would have looked like a dog.
So what year did you become? You became the head coach at UMass in what, 95?
95, yeah. Fall 94.
Yeah. 94.
So 95 was the first spring season. And,
this was a really interesting time. And I remember this pretty clearly that, Bill Tierney had revolutionized lacrosse with the model of slide and recover defense and slow it down. And I remember, you guys at UMass at one point in time did that. And I also remember that there was like, you flipped the switch one year. We're like, you know what? We're not doing that anymore. We're going fun and gun. Yes. And I don't know if this resonates with you like it did with me, but it really made a big difference for your team. Tell us what it was like to be a new head coach and all the decisions that go along with how you're going to play and how you find yourself.
Yeah, that was tough. And again, like you said, what Princeton was doing and some of the other teams, Navy had always done it. They were the king of the 6-5 game. I hired Jim Strube, who was one of your teammates at Brown. Yeah. And we kind of sat down and looked at our roster and said, hey, what kind of game are we playing here? And we weren't very deep. So we did decide to kind of slow it down on offense and be a little bit more controlled. Always at UMass when I played, and for those years you're talking about, the people you played against,
yep.
We were a run and gun team, and so we felt good about it, about playing that way, about controlling it, and then playing really disciplined on defense. It's one thing that we really needed to change here at UMass was to be disciplined on defense. We weren't as good in the goal as we were in the glory days there, right, with Sal and some of the other guys. It was a conscious decision to do it. We trained that way. We scripted a lot of things on both sides of the ball. We actually scripted sometimes the first minute or 2 on offense of each game. This is exactly what we're going to do, and we'd go through it in a pregame. Scary stuff,
All scripting.
It was scary stuff, but it worked for us during that time. We were successful. We went to the tournament in 95. We should have been in the tournament in 96. I felt in 97 we went to the quarterfinals and actually played Princeton and lost 11-9 when they won the national title. And then after that, I think 98, 99, 2000, we went through a time where teams were, they knew how we played. And in recruiting, we struggled based on the fact that people were talking about, hey, UMass slows the ball down. Do you want to be part of that? And I felt that really affected how we recruited.
Yeah.
And so we made a conscious decision in 2000, a couple of years later, to try to go up tempo again and allow the guys to go out there and play. And we recruited that way. And we were able to recruit Kevin Lavelle and Chris Fiore, and Matt McFarland on defense, and Mark Morley. We had some great kids that wanted to run up and down, and it enabled us to, we told them in recruiting, this is the way we're going to play. And then when they came to us, that's the way we played. So it was a change. It was a good learning experience for me as a coach, for us as a staff to kind of shift. And that shift kind of propelled us into the early 2000s where we were very successful again.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it goes to show you that you can shift. And you could have shifted back and had success too. I mean, it's not like just how you're playing. It's kind of like, committing to something and being able to coach it well. I'm sure you needed to play when you played fast. You still had to play disciplined defense, but it is kind of nice to be able to recruit and get people excited about, getting up and down and playing that way.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. We still coached the heck out of our guys as much as we could. And they bought into it. They loved being part of that. They loved running, and said, okay, now we got to condition a little bit more because we got to be in great shape to get up and down. And then they bought into that. Right. So it was all part of it. And I think we became really aggressive on the defensive end. We were a little held back before that. We became aggressive. We went out, we extended on people. We asked our guys to be more physical. We got athletes that were more physical. Think of, Matt McFarland and Tom Fallon, who was, 6'4", 245 pounds, and AJ Capelli, who was 6'2", 225 pounds, and McFarland was 6'3", 220. That was our starting defense. And, when the ball came over the midline and those clears that you're talking about and those long passes, guys started getting alligator arms, and that kind of like created this, for us, it created this confidence that, hey, not only are we going to push the tempo, we're going to push the intimidation factor on people and try to do our best defensively to turn it up and turn it up a notch and get the ball going in transition.
Yeah, toughness was definitely a calling card. And I remember I was a young head coach at the time, and I remember hearing about these drills they would do at UMass where there were like no rules. I think Andy Shea, was Andy Shea your assistant at that time?
He was. Yes.
And so tell me about that, because I got a funny story. I actually like did that. I asked my associate AD, hey, do you think I could do this? Like, they're like, yeah, I mean, why not? And so questions later,
you might get in trouble today.
You probably would.
Right? And no one really knew kind of what we were doing other than our trainer. And so it was Shea was the culprit. Shea was the guy behind this whole thing.
No
he was the evil guy, right?
He's probably still doing that stuff.
Yeah, he could be. But we had a drill called Clear the Crease. And basically it was a 2-on-2 free-for-all. And you roll the ball in, and the offensive guys are supposed to pick it up, and the defensive guys are supposed to check down, and the goalie was supposed to give up rebounds and keep the ball loose, and who was going to come up with the ground ball and who was going to be tougher on the ground ball. And at times it wound up being, no sticks, guys grabbing each other, wrestling, fighting each other. It was hilarious half the time, No one really got hurt during that time, which was great, but there was always that intimidation factor for young guys coming in, hearing about it and then being a part of it. And it was sort of a, coming to manhood kind of thing. Now I'm at UMass and I'm a real lacrosse player kind of guy. It's pretty fun stuff that
it was.
The guys really thrived on it, and they loved it, and they kind of felt because of things like that they were going to be tougher in any way they played. Yeah.
Well, we did that during like our tryout portion, and these poor walk-ons
right
just got it. Sure. It was like the older guys were just preying on these young. So
I mean, they were just waiting for it. I'm sure. I'm sure of it.
And so Struby was a freshman when I was a senior. He coached with you for how many years? Like 8 years, 7 years, something like that?
Yeah, he coached from 95 to 2000, so 5 years.
Okay. So I know one of the things he brought to you, terminology-wise, that I hear people, every now and then I hear people bust out the terminology, the snively look.
Yes.
The snively look is a classic UMass term, and what does it mean?
Snively is catching the ball backhanded, right? Cross-handed, backhanded, right? And
Over your shoulder.
right over the shoulder, or when you're inside,
Yeah.
just being crafty and catching it, whether you're coming from the wing or whether you're coming from behind, anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And it was from Jim, but I think it derived from Pete Lasagna, right? Who was the coach? No, you're telling me.
That's why I wanted to like clarify. I didn't know if you know the actual origins of the Snively look.
I know Snively was a coach or somebody, right, in New England, because there's a Snively Award. There's a person Snively.
Nope. So you're going to laugh at this. This is hilarious. So Paul Hooper was the offensive coordinator for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years at Brown. You remember Hoops, right?
Yes.
And Hoops brought the Snively look. And he was like, when you're an attackman, you got to sneak in behind your guy, especially on man up and on fast breaks. You're the lefty. You got to sneak in, put your stick in front of you, kind of like that guy, Snively Whiplash.
Snively Whiplash.
But of course, it's actually Snidely Whiplash. But Snively Whiplash, the cartoon character, is where the Snively look actually comes from. And it is like you got to be sneaky like that guy. And that was Paul Hooper's way of getting us to think about being sneaky. But, I just wanted to share that with you because I knew you'd find it interesting.
It's very interesting. Thanks for clarifying. And Paul Hooper also was instrumental for us, for Jim Strube and myself, in breaking a 10-man ride. So I'm imagining Dom did it all the time at Brown. Dom Starsia did it all the time.
Yeah, he did it. But also Tony Seamen was doing it at Penn the whole time, and that's where he got really good at it. But what was his what did he teach you?
So basically, it was bringing people back, right? So so it's a 7-on-6 on our offensive end, right? And we're bringing guys back down to their straying line, bringing midfielders down to the end of the face-off wing stripe.
Yeah.
And stepping back down to the ball, basically, right? Yep. You have 2 defensemen and a goalie, but also stepping down to the ball and dragging across the midline as well, right? So the way they did it back then, most of the time on a 10-man was on the sideline. So you jumped over on a sideline because all of our clearing was on the sidelines, but you had to jump back to stay on sides, right? If the ball was redirected. So Hooper dragged that guy from the opposite side, and you would throw the ball into him, and then he'd have a great view at the goal with the goal open, basically at the face-off X in that area. And so whenever we played Virginia at the time, because Dom moved on to Virginia in 93, I believe, or 92, right? Whenever we played Virginia, we played him a number of years with, when Jim Strube was coaching with us, he 10-manned us all the time. And then we were able to, we called Hooper. He gave us the skinny, and we were very successful against that 10-man ride, and we still do the same thing today. Yeah. Again, it was very successful then. It's very successful now. And so Paul Hooper not only gave us the Snively, but he also gave us how to break the 10-man in red.
Well, that guy was just an amazing lacrosse mind. He was a coach's son, had a huge influence on me. When I first started coaching at Yale, I went to sit down with him and he gave me his notebook, which to this day I still have. It's this red, thick notebook with like all these plays drawn up and all these concepts and like everything from, he was on the staff at Carolina in '86 when they won it. He was the head coach at Vermont. And then he got out of coaching and ended up having an amazing career. And his son played at Virginia. So one of the all-time best. Now he fishes every day. Okay. Pretty much. Yeah.
Probably taking Pressler out, right?
Fishing. Yeah, him and John Hooper, his older brother, and Pressler.
That's right. That's what it is. Okay. Gotcha.
The Phi-Lacrosse-ophy podcast is brought to you in part by the JM3 Coaches Training Program. If you are a coach interested in sharpening your saw, like so many of the guests on the show, you are going to love the content in this program. Go to www.jm3coaches.com for more information.
So I want to talk a little bit about your 2006 team and the run you guys made to the national championship. And you kind of ran into maybe one of the best, if not the best. You could argue they're the best team in the history of, they're in the running for that. I kind of feel like if you guys on any other year, you probably could have won a national championship. But talk about that team and some of those players. You had some unbelievable talent, but you played great lacrosse too.
You did. Well, and obviously it starts straight up the middle with Doc Schneider. He was a freshman. We had gone to the quarterfinals in 2003 and 2005, and up to that point, UMass has never won a quarterfinal game. And then Doc came in as a freshman, was outstanding in the goal, and that's kind of solidified that. We had been a little up and down in the goal, and finally we get this guy. What the amazing story is, we recruited these goalies that are highly rated. We recruited this guy from Peak 200 camp that I used to run.
Good old Peak 200.
Exactly. And, Doc was getting recruited by Gettysburg and UMass. And that was it. And so, we thought, okay, here's this guy. He's a little chubby, he's a little, but he's got great hands. So we'll see what happens. They came for no scholarship. And, he shows up in the locker room, the first meeting in the locker room in the fall. I'm looking around, the guy saying hello to everybody. I don't even recognize him. He lost like 35 pounds. He's like 180 pounds. He's a little skinny kid now. So he plays great all year long. We actually had two good goalies.
Late bloomer.
Totally. I mean, we had two really good goalies. This kid, Nick Schuba, and
yeah, I remember that kid. I recruited him.
Right. And Doc wound up winning the job in the second scrimmage in the spring. That's how good both of these guys were. And Nick wound up transferring after that year to Bucknell, and he led the nation in save percentage the next year, believe it or not. Right?
Wow.
So Doc comes in, he solidifies it. You have Jack Reed on the defensive end, who is just an absolute killer.
He's an all-time great.
Great player. First team All-America here.
6'4" lefty, total ass beater, really slick and smart.
Totally, right? But he's the guy that you'll sit down and talk to, interview. He's the brightest guy you'll want to meet. And then when he steps on the field, he transforms into a different animal, right? And he was just a great leader on the field every day for his 4 years, right? And then you go through, we always struggled facing off during those years, 2003, 2005. And we faced off Jake Dean with a long pole. And he had done it in high school. He had done it a little bit for us. Kind of the end of the 2005 season, he came around a little bit, was winning faceoffs for us. 2006, he was totally dialed in and won 64% of his faceoffs.
With his long pole, and he was the king of the rake, right? He just raked it.
Quick rake every single time.
Yep.
Fought for the ground ball. If it was 50-50, he'd come up with it. Had about, I think, 4 goals, 7 assists on the year. Kind of that guy would propel us. Scored a big goal in the semifinal game against Maryland off the face-off. And then he won the next one and dished it, and we scored. And that was kind of what propelled us to that win.
I recruited every single one of those guys. I tried to get them, including maybe the best player in Peak 200 camp history, Sean Morris.
Sean
Morris. You remember how freaking good he was at that camp?
Fantastic. And now Sean Morris went to Rutgers out of high school.
Right. For Coach Durgel.
Bill Durgel convinced them that they were going to win a national title there. So he went, and 9/11 happened. He saw it from his dorm room, and he came home, and fortunately for us, he came to us. Another tremendous leader, a guy, 5'9", was benching at that point like 330, 340, was squatting like 450. He was just a power pack, a tremendous athlete, great goal scorer, great feeder. He was the total package as well. So those 3 guys, and then Doc, coming in, those 3 guys are with us. Yeah. And Doc coming in straight up the middle really, really kind of helped us. And then we had contributions from guys that we hadn't had, for 4 years. Jamie Yeaman, upstate kid, played his best lacrosse, right? Clay Stabert, right? Hadn't played for us for 3 years. As a senior, starts on attack for us and does an incredible job. Jimmy Connolly comes in, right? His older brother Ryan plays for us. His dad Steve was a captain here.
Steve was my coach at the Boston Blazers.
Right. And so Jimmy Connolly's a freshman and scores, over 30 goals that year, right? Just tremendous contributions from a lot of guys. On defense, Dave Von Voigt and Sean Krieger, 2 really unheralded guys as sophomores. They start with Jack Reed. And I tell you, Jack Reed busted these guys' balls mercifully, constantly, every day, right? And it made those guys better players. And that kind of what formulated us as a group.
Yeah.
You know, you know, we were a little up and down during the year. We beat Hofstra in the first game. We lose to Albany. Albany was kind of just coming on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's when Albany was getting really, really, really good.
They had Resetaritz and
They had yep.
And Thompson at that time, right?
Yep.
And then Mitty, that really
Levine. Yep. Very good team. And we went and beat Loyola. You know, we lost to Georgetown that year. We kind of felt like we got lucky because Hofstra went on a run. You know, they were 17-1, and our only loss was to us, and they were one of the top seeds. So we sneak in the tournament, and they send us to Cornell, and you know, and nobody. I remember Lee Felsmo saying, you know, Cornell's going to kill us, and you know, all this stuff. And Jack Reed, you know, before the game was on the bus screaming. We had what our associate AD, who's now the head AD at Rhode Island, Thor Bjorn, is on the bus, and he's sitting behind me, and Jack Reed is screaming on the back of the bus at our team how they think that they're going to kick our ass, and Lee Felsmo this and Lee Felsmo that, and right, and all these things. And I turn around and I look at this guy, and he's so fired up, my AD. And we go out and we play. They were really, really strong team at the time. Cornell, strong attack. They had the two middies.
Hall probably.
Lucas. And Max Siebold. He's a freshman, and he killed us. You know, he had like 5 goals in the game. Back and forth game. We win at the end, and great. We go back to play Hofstra down at Stony Brook that year, and good game to start. Hofstra takes off on us 10-5 in the third quarter, and it looks like, you know, Hofstra's going to beat us in the game, and we chip away. Jimmy Connolly scores a goal. So all these things happen. We win this great Jack Reed and Jake Dean on the face-off. It's about a minute and a half ground ball of a face-off. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah.
Rory Pedrick scores a huge goal. We're man up. The other coaches are telling me to call timeout. I'm like, no. He goes down and scores in transition, man up, because we turn the ball over. So we go into overtime. We win the face-off, and then an incredible thing happens. Brett Garber, who is obviously Dick Garber's grandson, Ted Garber's son, connects with Jimmy Connolly, who's, you know, Steve Connolly's son, Ryan Connolly's brother. You know, both of those guys connect. The legacies of those families connect.
Amazing.
Scoring overtime to go to the Final Four. It's just incredible story. And again, once we get there, it's gravy. Our guys are riding high.
You guys beat a Maryland team that in the semifinals. So that was the first year that Denver made the NCAA tournament, and we lost to them in the first round, and they were great. I mean, they had Joe Walters, and who was the middie? The kid, unbelievable athlete. Like, he was like, everybody wanted this kid, and like Cottle was in his heyday, you know, of like owning the lacrosse world, and you know, it was just unbelievable talent on that team.
They were stacked on D. They were stacked in the midfield on attack. They were stacked everywhere. Great group, well coached.
Yeah,
Loff was still there with Coach Cottle. Yeah. Andy Copeland was there with Coach Cottle at the time. And, you know, again, we kind of scrap in the game. Doc and our defense, Jason Miller, who was coaching with us at the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they had played Princeton the game before, and he talks to Metzi, and Metzi says, listen, just slide adjacent to everything on their sweeps, and they're not going to feed the ball. So we kind of come up with the scheme that we're going to do. Jack Reed kind of just buys into it. He hammered 3 of their midfielders, you know, off the sweep, just flying upfield. And fortunately, we hang in there, and Doc makes the saves, and we win the game. So here we are. We're going to national title. It's like, holy cow! How do we get here? You know, we went just, you know, yeah, we're getting to the Final Four. Everybody's fired up. Now we're playing for a national title. You know, and how do we get our guys to relax enough to be able to play and play this great Virginia team? And you know, you have no rest. You know, obviously Virginia, as you said, great team. But why they were so good was because of their depth. Yeah. You know, they were throwing out 3 face-off guys. They had 3 midfields. Their attack was unbelievable group with Pasquet and I think it was Billings and
Matt Ward.
Ward. He was the MVP of it. It's just incredible group. And we hung in there.
Yeah.
You know, we hung in there for, 3 quarters, and then, the can opened up and we fouled and they took over. They won it. But incredible team, incredibly proud of the team, and just really proud of what they brought in terms of leadership. And that was sort of a model for us. And I just remember those 3 guys, Jake Dean and Jack Reed, and this is for anybody that's listening, and Sean Morris coming in and saying, hey, Coach, this was before the season started, we want to do something different this year. We want to practice on Sundays and have Mondays off, to do like the football model and stuff. I'm like, well, listen, at the time I had 2 young kids that Sundays we came into work in the morning, but we left in the afternoon and we spent time with the kids. That was really the only time during the week that you could do it. So I said, I don't want to do this. How about we do this, guys? How about we don't drink the entire season? And the guys looked at me and they were like, wait, what? But we don't know if we can do that. Well, why not? Have we ever tried it? Has anyone ever tried it? Has any team at UMass ever tried it? I don't think so. So we tried it, and they did a good job. And so I think that was one of the things that they grabbed onto as well. As the season moved on, we remained strong and healthy and fit, and we were ready to go once those playoffs started. So that was sort of a model for, moving forward with our UMass teams from year to year. I bring the captains in and say, okay, what do you want to do? What do you mean? Well, are we drinking? Are we not drinking? How's this going to work? Some teams will give me some dates that they're going to drink. Some teams say, no, we're not going to drink. And, more times than not, it's the teams that don't drink are the more successful, focused teams, especially early part of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're feeling great during those days, and they can actually recover better without using the alcohol. So
no doubt.
That was a lesson learned for all of us, including myself, during that time.
Yeah. Amazing stories. So let's fast forward now to the present. Give us a thought on sort of where you're at now. I mean, you've been coaching as a head coach for 28 years, and you've been an assistant for another 6 or whatever. You've been coaching for a while. You're always learning. Where are you at right now with how you're trying to build your team culture?
Yeah, that's ever evolving. It's a really good question. We're focused on, especially with the cost of your college education, we've tried to focus on really good students. They can get academic money here or other places. People that continue to put aside personal accolades for the betterment of the team.
Yeah.
One thing I learned from Coach Garber and Coach Beckman, I mentioned before, I'm willing to be one of those spokes, right? Because everybody that you recruit, and a lot of teams go through this, everybody you recruit, they're the best kid at their high school, best athlete at their high school, county, state, etc. And when you get here, there's still only one ball to play on offense, and you still need to play team defense. You can't just go off on your own and do what you want. So it's a willingness to be able to do that, to find people, that are willing to do that, be part of that. And that may not always be the upper echelon kid. That may be the unheralded kid, the 4-star, the 3-star kid that we're going to get here at UMass that wants to work really hard. And then when they get here, have the team embrace each other. Have the seniors embrace the young guys. Have them mentor those guys. One of the things that UMass have been very, very fortunate to have is, when you think of it, it has nothing to do with lacrosse. The food here, we've been #1 food in the country the last 4 years.
Wow.
So all of our players, all of our older guys still eat in the dining hall. So we encourage those
That's amazing
guys.
For the team culture, isn't it?
It is. So we encourage those guys, get to the dining hall. But first off, get to the dorm that the freshmen and sophomores are living in. Bring them to lunch. Bring them to dinner. Sit down with them. Have conversations. Talk to them about how hard it is, that they were in the same position, at one point that these guys are in now, the young guys. Embrace those guys. They have to play well, at least in practice, for us to be a good team. So embrace that. bring those guys together. And so our critical mass is as tight as possible. And if anybody pulls out of that, that we can grab them and bring them back. So that's kind of where we are in terms of the culture, recruiting quality people always, recruiting quality students so they can, the best students are also some of the best learners, some of the best guys out there on the field that can retain the information that we're coaching, right? But also fostering an environment that is very healthy and inclusive for everybody to be part of. As a freshman, you don't feel like, hey, I'm not part of this team. You are part of this team. You're an essential part of this team.
Well, it's great too, because if you don't, the team's all together at practice in the locker room. So that always happens. And then the team's usually all together when they're out on Saturday night, but it's nice to get them together, not in the locker room and not at a party, and have them together, in a dining hall, just hanging out.
Very, very important, right? And the time typically in the past was spent away from each other, like you're saying. And then the only time that they were together on away from lacrosse or away from the locker room was at a party, in a party situation, right? The house or wherever it is, right? And now they can have those good conversations, I think, with each other, sober first off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But just have real conversations about where each other are at.
Yeah. So let's take that concept of, what you're looking for and how you develop character into how are you developing your individual players? I mean, you got to recruit kids. You just sort of alluded to the fact that you want good learners. I'm sure you want good athletes you can develop. How do you do that for either side of the ball, both sides of the ball?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that most kids struggle with is shooting and off the ball play. So during our off season or what have you, right after our fall ball's over, we have about 4.5 weeks to work on with individuals or small groups now. And most of that time is done shooting, right? Quick moves, footwork stuff, talking about that for them, trying to focus on shooting the ball overhand, right? Especially at certain angles, in the alleys or from the wing or trying to get underneath, really focusing on that, for those guys and drilling that as much as we can. Right now, Doc Schneider does a lot of that work with our players, even though he was a goalie, and a defensive guy as a player. He coaches our offense here now and does a super job. And again, most of the focus is on technique and footwork for those guys. And then obviously the hands part of it, right? Defensively, that's Craig McDonald, who's been with us now for 5 years as an assistant. It's a lot of footwork, right? A lot of shell drill stuff. You talked about slide and recover in the past. We're working through still a lot of that stuff for the younger guys in particular, right? But it's ladder drills. It's using ladders for breakdowns. It's using ladders for retreats, right? Just really kind of getting that footwork stuff done for our guys on a daily basis. It's really not much more than that, right? We'll do all the holds and drives, defenders, against defenders or defenders against 100 against 50. The offense guys 50%, and we're defending. We're going to drive him upfield in what we do, right? Sometimes we're going to try to roll guys back in what we do, depending on what team it is. Listen, all those things are done from not only from this time during the year, but it's done from day one. We took 3 weeks before we started fall ball, and we did individuals with our guys. And then we moved into practice, and we moved back out to individuals during this time of year. Because once the season starts, there's still time that we take each and every day. We take 10 or 15 minutes to work on individual stuff in every practice, but more of the focus is on the team stuff during the spring.
So it sounds like you guys are using, like the old school days when we could only go with 4 kids at a time. And
yeah.
For me, that was literally I don't want to say my favorite time of the year, but it was a very kind of sacred time of the year because, number one, as a coach, you got to really know your players when you only had 4 of them out there. And I was a head coach, but I got out there. I liked doing it. My feet would hurt at the end of the week because I'd be on my feet for, like however many, 10 hours,
right,
times two times a week. But it was also a time as a coach, when you really start teaching individual stuff, you learn so much.
You do. You learn a lot. You also, you find out who's coachable, who can retain, right? And not only that, because we're allowed to do some team practice.
Yeah.
We have 4 hours of team practice that we use. So who can translate that into when you go 6-on-6 or when you play full field? Who can bring the individual teaching and learning into, the full field process? So it's important. And so what we kind of do with our group is half of our team is with the strength coach on another field, right? Not with us. And then we have the other half of the team for a half hour, right? And we can work on defensive stuff, middies and close defensemen and poles go with Mac, and then attackmen, and then half the middies go with Doc. And then we flip-flop the middies halfway through. So everybody gets at least a half hour of not only individual training, but also they get that speed training with their strength coach, again, away from us on another field. So we pack it into an hour, and then after we complete that hour, the guys are in a weight room for 45 minutes. So they're getting a pretty good workout even in the off season when we're kind of laying off of them a little bit. During that time we have a total of 8 hours, and they're doing a little more self-directed stuff on their own, going out in small groups on their own with some of the leaders, shooting and getting reps in that regard. So we'll work in that regard. So they're still getting their work, but we're compacting it into what our schedule is for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday.
That's really interesting stuff. I want to ask you about something that I've been really, really interested in lately. I've sort of been gradually getting more and more interested, but it really goes back to probably how you grew up as an athlete and how I grew up as an athlete, of unstructured play and free play and pickup, because that's how we learned to be athletes. Like back in the day, you and me, I guarantee we've never talked about this, but we didn't depend on our coach to make us into a good player growing up because we played the games enough. In fact, we're probably good enough at several sports to be pretty good. And whereas these days, everybody depends on their coach to teach them the skills, to rep it out, to all of this. Now, one of the things that I've read about and listened to some podcasts and had some podcasts on is the idea of the reason why this free play is so important is because it's pretty much puts the decision-making on the athlete, the decision for everything, the decision for how you're going to guard somebody, what you're going to do without the ball, what you're going to do when you get the ball. When we think about reps, we think about like, we got to get better at our shooting. We got to get better at our footwork. And we do, there's no question. But so often we're forgetting about the fact that perceiving what's happening around you is the first step. And then making a decision of whatever skill to use or what to do is the next step. And then executing that decision with a skill is the third step. And I think majority of the time we think about just get reps and let's work on our skills, when really, most kids can do a lot more than they actually ever do. And you sort of mentioned this, how does it translate? How are we translating, as a player translating what we're working on to the game? And so I just wanted to ask you about your thoughts on that topic, and as well as, how do you actually sort of think about teaching decision-making?
Yeah. Good question. I haven't thought too much about it, that you bring it up, but decision-making is on the guys, I feel. I agree with you 100%. We grew up playing as many sports as we possibly could. I think one of the things in terms of playing full-time lacrosse, some kids get burnt out of it. They stop listening. They don't work as hard as they should when they have the sticks in their hands. But I think what we do here at UMass, and this is one of Coach Garber's strengths, was he would put us in sets and he would teach us the basics of an offense. And then he'd say, okay, guys, go play.
Yeah.
And then, like you're saying, we had to make those decisions on our own. And we are constantly with our guys telling them, listen, we can help you. We can show you, right? But eventually on the field, we're going to allow you to make these decisions, and we trust you to make these decisions, right? These are A, B, and C, potentially your options, but we want you to be an athlete and show us, right, what you have inside you as an athlete, right, as a player, and excel. And we're going to kind of let you go from there, right? If we ever made Sean Morris or Jimmy Connolly or any great player, or Mark Millen versus Yale in 1993, if we ever made him play within something really tight, they never would have been the players that they
Right.
have. So it's always been our philosophy to kind of guide and then allow them to go out and find themselves, right? So it's always been like a seek and discover method of teaching. And when we were phys ed, that was one of the things that you could do with older kids. Young kids, you really had to be structured. Some of the older kids, you had to kind of let those guys find out on their own what worked, what didn't work. And we've always tried to do that here at UMass. But I haven't really thought too much about that recently. But again, we're letting our guys play.
But it fits into what you grew up with and what you're doing. There's no question you need structure and you need to work on things. You need to show people, but at the end of the day, they need to figure some things out on their own, right?
They do. I feel more comfortable coaching that way than I did from 95 to 99.
Yeah.
Right. And really kind of restricting what people did. I feel better as a coach. I feel more productive as a coach to allowing our athletes to be exactly that, great athletes.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. And I think that's why when we think about multi-sport athletes, right? Everybody loves multi-sport athletes, but I've been giving this some thought too. And I think some of it has to do with when we think of multi-sport athletes, you especially think about basketball as being like the best translation of a multi-sport athlete.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, it's because in basketball, they play pickup most of the time. The majority of the basketball is pickup. And that's where you learn the nuances of somebody's guarding me or they're overplaying me and I'm going to do something different, or how to guard somebody. And, the little chess match within a matchup, it's like, how you're like, we have to like talk about who a lefty is. I mean, if you have that sort of fluency, who the lefties are, right? That guy's going to be coming back left every time. And
Yep.
I think it has to do with that a lot.
I would agree with you. I would also consider as a wrestler, high school wrestler, when you jump out there on the mat, it's mano a mano. It's you against your opponent only. And there's a lot of structure within wrestling, but there's also a lot of discipline within wrestling in terms of weight control, emotional discipline, right? When you get out there on the mat, you can't, in the first 30 seconds, blow yourself out, right? Because it's a 6-minute match longer, right? But it also, in terms of mental toughness, in terms of preparation, it really gets you ready, I think, for, the college game. Because ultimately, when we play, right, in tight games, it comes down to one-on-ones, like you're talking about. It comes down to someone breaking somebody down.
Yeah.
Not always, hey, we're going to run this play, and this guy's going to be open because we're setting a pick. Someone's got to create. Someone's got to create. And so that mano-a-mano piece of wrestling, all right, and I like the analogy with basketball because there's so much that comes over into lacrosse. But the mental part of it, the mental toughness part of wrestling has really helped a lot of lacrosse players move forward.
Yeah, interesting. I think box lacrosse, you've had your share of great Canadians over the years. I think box lacrosse creates this sort of level of fluency simply because there's less control. There's when we played, you sort of mentioned it, Coach Garber, would give you a set. At Brown, we had our own little, the little fish hook play, the dart play, that stuff that we just did. I mean, coaches didn't actually make us practice it.
Right.
Give and goes, for example, were just something that, I'd be like, to my boy Bernie Bonanno that I played attack with, we went to high school and college. I'd be like, hey, special. We would say our little plays together. I feel like in box lacrosse that happens a lot because of the shot clock, really. That there's just not a lot of time, and people are getting more reps. It's smaller sided, and I feel like box players in general have a level of fluency of how to move without the ball, of how to feed better and see things happening on the other side of the floor because they're reading that off the ball movement. Obviously, their two-man games and their fluency in feeding and finishing is off the charts because it's a real problem they have to solve. But I think it's really interesting when you sort of look at how these environments kind of create the players even before they get to UMass.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree, especially with those Canadians in terms of their ability to do everything on the field, in a larger space. That sort of freedom for those guys and not getting pounded like they do in the indoor game is a breath of fresh air for them. So I think our field game is, for those guys that come off the box season in the summertime and they come to us, even though they're a little beat up, it's really a pleasure to come back and not get so beat up and to be able to get to spots on the field that are going to make them successful. It's really, really cool thing to see.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, last question for you, Coach. Talk to us a little bit about recruiting and sort of what the kind of person you want, the kind of athlete you want, and maybe just touching on position by position what you're looking for at UMass.
Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit before, right? So obviously we want quality character guys. Most important, things that we talk to the high school coaches, talk to the club coaches about, the kids, are they workers, right? Is the guy that's going to work his butt off when he gets here. You watch them in the high school games, are they listening to the coaches, right? In timeouts, halftime, or they have their heads up in the stands. Do they celebrate with their teammates, or do they celebrate by themselves, after a goal or a teammate's goal, or somebody passed them the ball and, assisted them and they scored a nice goal. Do they go to that guy and congratulate him? So a lot of different things in there in terms of personality wise. And obviously we have to sit down and meet with them. But as you mentioned before, toughness is a key. Obviously speed is a key. We're not so concerned about size. Obviously size can help, right? The bigger kids are going to be sometimes more forceful, especially at the face-off X. If you look at any of the face-off guys in Division I, they're in the 60%. There's no small guys like me doing it, right? They're all bigger kids. They're all big, powerful kids. We're also looking for on attack. We want guys that are going to be able to play off the ball, right? Know the game off the ball, because you're so used to having the ball in your stick in high school because your coach gives you the ball every time. And what do you do without it when you get here? Or when you don't have it, do you just stand there? So if they can learn that at an earlier age, right, and be really good off the ball, they'll be okay when they get here. We'll be able to help them move forward with it. Midfielders, we want two-way guys. We're playing two-way guys here. They're going to play offense, defense, transition, and then come on off. So it's guys that have the willingness to do it, first off, right? But also have the ability to do it.
Yeah, that's hard. It takes great physicality to be able to.
It does, and it also takes desire. I mean, right now with the shot clock, you have to play defense for 70 seconds, 65 seconds. It's not like the 2-3 minute thing that we used to have.
Right.
And then defensively, same thing. Obviously, we want agility. We want some strength. Doesn't matter how big you are. You have to be mean. You're not going to be able to cover the best attackman in the country with being a laid back dude, right? You have to have something to you. You have to have some shit to you to be able to cover people. But also you have to have a willingness to be part of something, like we're saying, and be a leader to lead others within what we do on defense. And then the goal, I leave that to Doc. Doc is looking for a certain personality. Obviously, hand speed is great. Looking for a guy that's going to work really, really hard to develop over time, potentially, maybe develop in 1 year for us. But just guys that are workers. And in general, we want people who are going to work hard. And Jamie, you mentioned it. If we're going to get a top kid or a second-tier kid here, they have to work hard. If we want to compete with the people we're competing with, there's no way around it. And everybody, there's 70-somewhat teams in Division I, everybody works hard. We have to work as hard, if not harder, than every one of those groups. So we want to make sure that those people are ready for that. And when we sit down with people here in the office, I explain it to them. This is going to be hard. right? You're potentially in Eisenberg School of Management. It's the top business school in terms of public institutions in the Northeast, right? It's going to be really hard. They're going to challenge you, want you to be part of their community. And then you're going to buckle down with lacrosse and everything that we do and what we expect of you. This is going to be a really hard deal. And if you're not ready for that, this isn't the right place for you. And I think, and I hope that every Division I coach is having those conversations with their recruits, because that's what this is all about. And they have to be ready and willing, once they get here. And really, it's the preparation before getting here as well, preparing,
Right.
of continuing to work very, very hard with your high schools, with your high school coaches, with your teachers, with your parents, until you get here. And then it's a 4-year process from there.
How much video do you watch of recruits outside of their, the normal highlight film?
As much as we can, we'll ask for updated stuff. Someone send us something, we'll go watch them. We'll ask for updated. Anytime they're in, most of these kids now, anytime they go to a tournament, they have the availability to get it.
Mm-hmm.
So any kind of updates from the summer to the fall and into the spring, if you have updates, pass it on. So, we'll watch it, we'll watch film for a minute and a half, and we kind of know, from that minute and a half, it's not just highlight stuff. If it's a quarter or what have you, we try to watch that as well.
What do you think about this idea? I've thought about this a lot, that, everybody gives a highlight video, and a good player, they play enough games where they can come up with a lot of highlights, especially because not all the games are that competitive. And you can be like impressed with a skill or a move or some athleticism or whatever. But what do you think about kids putting together, I don't know, let's just say they play 5 games in a weekend in the summer, and they put together, a video of their touches, and not just meaningful touches. Like I want a video of all your dodges, your shots, your feeds, and then give me like 2 minutes of off-ball movements. Something along those lines. I mean, I feel like, you could do that yourself, but it just takes forever to get through the games. You can't see anything. You don't know who anybody is. It's like, you and me, our eyes you're not wearing glasses right now, but I'm guessing you might have a hard time seeing on your phone the way these young guys are watching highlight videos on the phone. That ain't happening with me.
Right.
But I was just curious, and I haven't even really asked about this, but I do a lot of that because I do a ton of video analysis for athletes, and we kind of break down their games that way. And I'm like, man, if I was a coach, I would like to see, if I'm interested in a kid, the highlight video is going to pique my interest. But then as a follow-up, give me a 7 or 8 minute video where I can just look at, a lot of times the almost plays that you can't put in a highlight video.
Yeah.
Are like great plays or very telling plays on things that, you might want to know about.
I like it. I like the idea. I think it's, if it's all touches, then
That's
how do you do? No, maybe not. But how do you do it with defense, right?
Yeah.
Do every time they're guarding someone, whether they scored on or not, and they don't want to put
all your one-on-ones, and then give us give us 3 minutes of your adjacent defense play. Give me 3 minutes of your crease play. Give me 3 minutes of man down or something along those lines, and just give us plays whether they were goals or not.
Yeah, I like it. Ultimately, as you mentioned, we're never sure who they're playing against.
Yeah.
And the one thing with all these club games that you watch, you mentioned it as well, the intensity level is not even close to what we would have at practice here or any practice that you've ever coached. So, how do you get it out of there? The best thing for us is live. It always is.
Always is.
And so you see all those touches. You see how they interact. You see what they give for the time that they're on the field. And if we're not seeing a guy 3 times, 4 times live before there's an offer, shame on us. I think you need that time. Obviously there's guys that you watch once or twice and you go, wow, this kid's dynamite. But the other kids that, for the most part, that we're all getting, you do need to see them live for a few times. So that those prospect events that kids are coming to, they're like the best thing for us.
Yeah.
And those aren't always the most competitive situations either, but you can see a lot within it. You can see everything that they do during that practice and then during the play time of those days.
I agree. I mean, there's no substitute for live. The problem with live is there's way too many kids and way too many events and not enough time. And I think that with the way recruiting's going now, seeing a kid 3 or 4 times, that would be great if you watch 4 full games of a player. That would be pretty good. But these aren't full games. These are 50-minute games, right? And so there might be 9 middies. And so, like, honestly, it's the sample size, even with 4 full games, is probably not enough to really know a player like you do. Like, after a season, you know a kid, right? You know a lot about them. And so that's why I was kind of wondering about this sort of almost highlight video concept, because it's not going to replace in person, but it might give you a chance to actually dig in. And we all know that whatever we thought we saw live is not the same as what we saw on film.
Right.
So if you thought somebody was awesome and they're like, it wasn't so good. You thought somebody was terrible. It's like, you know what? That wasn't so bad.
Yep. I agree with you. I think you're onto something, man.
Yeah, maybe. All right, man. Well, listen, Greg, have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for coming on. It was just an absolute pleasure to talk lacrosse with you, and look forward to doing it again sometime.
Thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate it. Have a good Thanksgiving, man.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Well.
Later.
The Phi-Lacrosse-ophy podcast is brought to you in part by the JM3 Lacrosse Academy. This 10-week online program is designed to teach cutting-edge lacrosse skills and IQ. Athletes will learn dozens of new techniques, creative drills, X's and O's, and most importantly, how to integrate it all into their game. To learn more or start getting better today, go to www.jm3sports.com/academy.